he found a letter from himself. The Letter in the Attic, a story by American Story Channel. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Portland, Oregon, and the Old Victorian on Hawthorne Street was doing what Old Victorians do best, leaking, creaking, and reminding its new owner that 1892 wasn't as romantic as the real estate listing had suggested. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway of the attic, flashlight in hand, staring at a space that hadn't seen daylight since the Carter administration. The smell hit him first. Dust and cedar and something else, something that made the hair on his arms stand up. Not rot, not mildew. Something that smelled like time itself had been trapped up here, fermenting in the dark. He'd bought the house 3 weeks ago, after the divorce, after the promotion at Morrison and Associates fell through, after his therapist in downtown Portland suggested he find a project, something to rebuild, something that wasn't his marriage, which had dissolved like sugar in the Willamette River. Just check the attic for bats, his contractor had said that morning, a burly guy named Mike who chewed nicotine gum and spoke in sentences no longer than 5 words. Bats mean rabies. Rabies means lawsuits. Ethan climbed the narrow stairs, each step groaning under his weight. At 34, he was in decent shape, ran the waterfront trail twice a week, lifted at the 24-hour fitness on Burnside, but these stairs made him feel ancient. They made him feel like he was climbing into someone else's life. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating boxes, trunks, a dressmaker's dummy wearing a faded flapper dress that looked like it had danced the Charleston at a speakeasy and never recovered. And then, in the far corner, beneath a window boarded up with plywood that had warped from decades of moisture, he saw it. A desk. Not just any desk. A roll-top desk, mahogany with brass fittings that caught the flashlight beam like cat's eyes. Ethan moved closer, his heart doing something strange in his chest, skipping, fluttering, remembering. He'd seen this desk before. He was sure of it. But where? In a dream. In a life he couldn't quite recall. The roll-top slid back with a whisper, revealing pigeonholes filled with yellowed papers, fountain pens dried to fossils, and a single envelope, centered on the writing surface like a gift left specifically for him. His name was on the front. Ethan Cole, not in the shaky script of an old woman, not in the formal cursive of a lawyer, in his handwriting. The same cramped, left-handed scrawl he developed in 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, the same way he crossed his T's with a little flourish, the same way his E's looked like they were leaning into a strong wind. He didn't open it, not immediately. He sat down on a trunk, someone's hope chest probably, with a sticker from the Union Pacific Railroad still clinging to its side, and stared at the envelope until his flashlight began to dim. The rain on the roof sounded like fingers tapping, impatient. The house settled around him, wood expanding, contracting, breathing. Finally, his hand shaking in a way that had nothing to do with the Portland chill, he opened it. Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, you found the desk. If you found the desk, you've bought the house on Hawthorne. If you've bought the house on Hawthorne, then Sarah has left you. The promotion went to Henderson, and you're wondering if the rest of your life is just a series of rooms you'll wander through alone. I know this because I am you. I am writing this on October 14th, 2024. You are reading it, I assume, sometime in 2026, based on the timeline we discussed with the realtor. Yes, we discussed this. Yes, I remember buying the house. Yes, I remember climbing these stairs, finding this desk, and finding a letter just like this one. Don't stop reading. I know you want to. I know you're thinking this is a prank or a hallucination, or that someone with handwriting remarkably similar to yours has an elaborate sense of humor. Keep reading. Your life depends on it, not metaphorically, literally. Ethan stopped. His mouth had gone dry. October 14th, 2024. That was today. He'd spent the morning at Stumptown Coffee on Belmont, arguing with his ex-wife's lawyer about the division of assets. He'd eaten a sad sandwich from the New Season's market. He'd climbed these stairs at 4:47 p.m., according to his phone, which suddenly felt like a brick in his pocket. He looked at the letter again. The paper was aged, certainly, yellowed at the edges, soft as cloth, but the ink looked fresh. The handwriting, his handwriting, looked like it had been written moments ago. He read on. You're going to meet someone tomorrow. Her name is Grace Holloway. She works at the Powell's Books on Burnside, in the rare books room. She's 31. She has a scar on her left palm from a cooking accident when she was 12, and she quotes Raymond Chandler when she's nervous. She'll be wearing a green dress with white polka dots, and she'll be looking for a first edition of The Big Sleep that she claims is for a customer, but is actually for herself. Go to her. Talk to her. Ask her about the scar. She'll tell you the story, and when she does, she'll laugh in a way that makes you forget about Sarah, forget about Henderson, forget about everything except the fact that her eyes are the color of the Columbia River on a clear day. But here's what you need to understand, Ethan. Here's the part that matters more than anything else. Don't fall in love with her. The flashlight flickered. Ethan slapped it, cursed, slapped it again. The beam steadied, but his hands didn't. Grace Holloway. He didn't know anyone by that name. He hadn't been to Powell's in months. Too many memories of Sarah, who had loved the place, who had spent hours in the Pearl Room while he drank overpriced lattes and pretended to read the Oregonian. Don't fall in love with her. Why would his future self, if that's what this was, write such a thing? Why would anyone write such a thing? He turned the page. There were 3 more sheets, covered in that familiar, maddening script. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm bitter or damaged, or that Grace did something terrible and I'm warning you away from heartbreak. It's not that. It's never been that. Grace is perfect. Grace is the love of your life in every way that matters. When you meet her, you'll understand what people mean when they talk about souls recognizing each other. You'll understand why poets write sonnets, and why wars are fought, and why the world keeps spinning despite everything. But Grace is going to die. On December 3rd, 2025, she'll be crossing the Hawthorne Bridge during rush hour. A truck will lose control on the ice. She won't suffer. I've been assured of this by people who know about these things. People you'll meet if you follow the rest of my instructions. But she will be gone. And you, Ethan, you will not survive her. The first time I lived this, I loved her. I loved her with everything I had, everything I was, everything I could become. And when she died, I died with her. Not physically. Physically, I kept breathing for another 40 years. But the man I was, the man who could love, who could hope, who could look at a sunrise and feel something other than grief. That man died on December 3rd, 2025, alongside Grace Holloway on the ice-slicked Hawthorne Bridge. I became a ghost. I wandered through decades like a man sleepwalking. I married again, twice. But they were marriages of convenience, of desperation, of trying to fill a hole that had no bottom. I had children who grew up knowing their father was somewhere else, even when he was in the room. I made money, lost money, made it again. I lived in this house until I was 78, and I died in the bedroom downstairs, alone, with a nurse who didn't know my name holding my hand. And then I woke up. Here. Now. October 14th, 2024. 34 years old, standing in the attic of a house I hadn't bought yet, with a letter in my hand from an even older version of myself, warning me about a woman I hadn't met. This is the third time, Ethan, the third loop, the third chance to get it right. Ethan stood up so fast the trunk scraped against the floorboards. He paced to the boarded window, pressed his forehead against the cold plywood. This was insane. This was insane. He was having a stroke, or a psychotic break, or he'd inhaled some mold spore that was currently rewriting his neural pathways into nonsense. But he couldn't stop reading. The first loop, I loved her and lost her and died old and empty. The second loop, I tried to save her. I told her about the bridge, about the truck, about the ice. I thought if she knew, she could avoid it. She could take a different route, stay home that day, live. She believed me. Grace was always too trusting, too willing to see magic in the world. She believed me, and she stayed home on December 3rd. And the truck hit someone else, a mother of 3, a woman named Patricia Okonkwo who was driving her daughter to piano lessons. Patricia died instead of Grace. Grace lived, but she never forgave herself. She became someone who flinched at every shadow, who saw death in every corner, who couldn't cross a street without hyperventilating. We stayed together for 6 years. I thought love could heal her, could heal us. But love isn't a scalpel, Ethan. It's not precise. It cuts where it wants, and it bleeds where it wants. And by the time Grace finally left me, left Portland, left everything, moved to a cabin in the Cascades where she didn't have to see bridges or trucks or the ghosts of women she'd never met, I was more broken than I'd been in the first loop. I died in that cabin, actually. Heart attack at 42. Grace found me. The guilt of that, of me dying in her arms after everything, it destroyed what was left of her. She didn't last another year, so this is the third loop. And this is what I need you to understand. Some people aren't meant to be saved. Some love stories aren't meant to have happy endings. Some hearts are meant to break in exactly the way they break because the alternative is worse. Don't go to Powell's tomorrow. Don't meet Grace. Let her find the big sleep on her own. Let her live her life without you. Let her cross that bridge on December 3rd and die the death she was always meant to die. It will be quick. It will be painless. And she will never know the weight of a woman named Patricia Okonkwo. Live your life, Ethan. Find someone else. Build something that doesn't have her ghost in the foundation. Let Grace Holloway remain a stranger, a name you might have loved, a face you might have memorized. Let her go. That's what love is in the end. Letting go. The letter ended there. No signature, no postscript. Just the final period, heavy as a stone, and 3 blank pages that seemed to accuse him of cowardice. Ethan sat in the dark for a long time. The rain stopped. The house creaked through its evening routine. Somewhere in the distance, a Max train rattled over its tracks, carrying commuters home to dinners and families and lives that made sense. He thought about Sarah, about the way she'd looked at him in the coffee shop that morning, not with hate, but with the worst thing, the look of someone who had already mourned him, who was just waiting for the funeral to catch up. He thought about Henderson, with his perfect teeth and his father's connections, getting the promotion that should have been Ethan's. He thought about his mother in Eugene, who called every Sunday and pretended not to notice that he never had anything to say. He thought about Grace Holloway, a woman he'd never met, a scar on her palm, a laugh like something he couldn't remember losing. And he thought about the letter, about the man he would become, the man who had written it, who had lived and died and lived again, who had loved and loved again and lost worse. A man who had decided, after 2 lifetimes of grief, that the only solution was no love at all. Was that wisdom? Or was that just exhaustion talking? Was that the voice of experience, or the voice of a man so broken he'd rather break the world than be broken by it again? Ethan folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He climbed down the attic stairs, each step still groaning, still ancient, still leading somewhere he hadn't chosen yet. He slept badly that night, in the bedroom downstairs, where a future version of himself had died alone. He dreamed of bridges and ice and women with river-colored eyes. He dreamed of letters written in his own hand, warning him away from everything that mattered. The next morning, October 15th, dawned clear and cold. The kind of Portland autumn day that made you believe the rain might actually stop for good this time. Ethan showered, dressed, ate toast without tasting it. He stood at his front door for 10 minutes, keys in hand, the letter burning in his pocket like a coal. Powell's City of Books occupied an entire city block on Burnside, a temple to literature that had survived fires and floods and the rise of digital everything. Ethan hadn't been there since the divorce, but his feet remembered the way. The 15 bus dropped him at the corner of 10th and Burnside, and he walked the last block with his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, telling himself he was just going to browse, just going to look, just going to prove to himself that the letter was a fantasy, a delusion, a trick of grief and isolation. The rare books room was on the 3rd floor, up a staircase lined with author portraits that seemed to watch him climb. Ethan paused at the top, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner demanding release. She was there, green dress, white polka dots, dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but probably took 20 minutes. She was bent over a glass display case, frowning at something inside, and when she straightened up, she ran her left hand through her hair, and Ethan saw it, the scar, pale and jagged, cutting across her palm like a secret she'd forgotten to hide. He should turn around. He should walk down the stairs, out the door, onto the bus, back to his leaking Victorian and his empty life and his future without Grace Holloway. He should be wise. He should be safe. He should be the man the letter wanted him to be. But Grace turned, and her eyes found his, and they were exactly the color the letter had promised. Columbia River green, deep and changing and full of everything that lived beneath the surface. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. Her voice was lower than he'd expected, with a hint of something rough, like she'd spent years smoking and then quit, leaving only the texture behind. Ethan opened his mouth to say no, to say he was just browsing, to say anything that would let him walk away with his heart still in one piece. Instead, he heard himself say, "Raymond Chandler, The Big Sleep, First Edition." Grace's eyebrows rose. Her hand dropped to her side, the scar hidden now but not forgotten. "That's specific. Are you a collector?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm just someone who found a letter." She laughed. The letter had been right about that too. It wasn't a polite laugh, or a social laugh, or any of the other kinds of laughter Ethan had grown accustomed to in his 34 years of cautious living. It was a laugh that started somewhere in her chest and tumbled out like water over rocks, like she couldn't have stopped it if she'd wanted to. "That's either the best pickup line I've ever heard," she said, "or the worst. I'm not sure which." "Probably the worst," Ethan admitted. "But it's true," he told her. Not everything. He wasn't ready to be committed or believed or any of the other consequences of full disclosure, but he told her about the house and the attic and the desk and the letter with his name on it. He told her about the rain and the smell of time and the way his hands had shaken when he'd read the words. Don't fall in love with her. Grace listened without interrupting, her river-colored eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Ethan became aware of the other customers in the rare books room, the muffled sounds of the city outside, the beating of his own heart. "Show me," she said finally. They went to Hawthorne Street that afternoon. Grace drove, a battered Subaru with a cracked windshield and a bumper sticker that read, "I brake for book sales." And Ethan sat in the passenger seat, feeling like he was 17 again, like the whole world was a door he could choose to open or close. The house looked different in daylight, less ominous, more sad. A fixer-upper with good bones and a century of stories in its walls. Grace climbed the attic stairs ahead of him, and Ethan watched the way she moved, confident, unhurried, like someone who had never learned to be afraid of dark spaces. The desk was still there. The letter, when Ethan produced it from his pocket, seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light filtering through the boarded window. Grace read it slowly, twice. Then she sat down on the same trunk Ethan had sat on, and she looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. "This is insane," she said. "I know. You could have made this up. You could be, I don't know, a very elaborate serial killer with excellent handwriting. I know, but you didn't." She stood up, crossed to the desk, ran her fingers along its edge. "Because no one writes a 3-page letter to themselves just to meet a woman in a bookstore. That's too much work, even for a serial killer." "So you believe me?" Grace turned. The light caught her scar, made it into something almost beautiful. A map of a life lived with sharp edges. "I believe that you believe it," she said carefully. "And I believe that something strange is happening in this attic, in this house, in whatever corner of the universe decided that Ethan Cole needed to find a letter from himself, warning him away from Grace Holloway. And I think the letter is wrong." She walked to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something with jasmine, something that made him think of summer gardens. "I think love isn't about letting go. I think it's about holding on, even when you know it's going to hurt. Especially then." "Even if it kills you?" "Even if it kills you." She took his hand, her scar pressing against his palm, fitting into his life like a piece he'd been missing without knowing it. "But here's the thing, Ethan. The letter says I die on December 3rd, 2025. It says a truck hits me on the Hawthorne Bridge." "Yes, so we change it. We don't avoid each other. We change the circumstances. I don't cross the bridge that day. Or I cross it at a different time. Or we find the truck before it finds me. We fight for the happy ending instead of accepting the tragic one." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. This woman he'd known for 3 hours. This woman who was already rearranging the furniture of his heart. And he saw what the letter had missed. He saw hope. Not the naive hope of someone who didn't understand loss, but the fierce hope of someone who understood it perfectly and chose to fight anyway. "The letter said I tried that," he said quietly. "In the second loop. I told you about the bridge and you stayed home, and someone else died instead. And it destroyed us anyway." Grace squeezed his hand. "Then we don't tell me. We don't tell anyone. We just live. We live every day like it's the gift it is. And on December 3rd, 2025, we deal with whatever comes. Together. And if it doesn't work, then at least we had the time we had. At least we didn't throw it away because we were afraid of the ending." Ethan thought of the man who had written the letter. The man who had loved Grace twice, lost her twice, and decided that the only answer was no love at all. He thought of that man dying alone in the bedroom downstairs with a nurse who didn't know his name. He thought of Patricia Okonkwo, the mother of 3, driving her daughter to piano lessons. He thought of Grace in a cabin in the Cascades, finding his body, carrying that weight until it crushed her. He thought of all the ways love could go wrong, all the ways it could break you, all the ways it could turn something beautiful into something that haunted you for 40 years. And then he looked at Grace Holloway, with her river-colored eyes and her scarred palm and her laugh like water over rocks. And he thought of all the ways love could go right. "Okay," he said. Okay. Okay, we fight for the happy ending. Grace smiled, and in that smile was every sunrise Ethan had ever missed. Every moment of joy he'd ever let slip away. Every version of himself that had ever stood in an attic with a letter in his hand and chosen fear over love. Good, she said, because I already called dibs on the big sleep. You're going to have to find your own first edition. They spent the next 14 months building a life together. Ethan fixed the house on Hawthorne Street, one room at a time, Grace helping him strip wallpaper and sand floors and discover the stories hidden in the walls. They found a child's drawing from 1923, a love letter from 1956, a newspaper clipping about the moon landing tucked behind a baseboard like a time capsule. Grace kept working at Powell's, but she started writing too. Short stories at first, then a novel, a mystery set in Portland's rainy streets that earned her an agent and a modest advance. Ethan left Morrison and Associates and opened his own practice, small and selective, taking only cases that mattered to him. They adopted a dog from the Oregon Humane Society, a mutt with one ear that stood up and one that flopped down, named Chandler after Grace's favorite author. They didn't talk about December 3rd, not directly, but it was there, always, a shadow on the calendar, a whisper in quiet moments. Ethan found himself watching Grace sometimes when she didn't know he was looking, memorizing the way she moved, the way she laughed, the way she pushed her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. He was storing up moments, building a reservoir against the drought to come. On November 15th, 2025, Grace came home from Powell's with a strange expression on her face. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten 1,000 meals, where they'd paid bills and planned vacations and made love once during a thunderstorm because the power was out and there was nothing else to do. I know about the bridge, she said. Ethan's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. What? The bridge. December 3rd. I know. She pulled an envelope from her bag, yellowed with age, soft as cloth. I found this in the rare books room today, in the Big Sleep. First edition. It has my name on it. She slid it across the table. Ethan didn't open it. He didn't need to. Grace. It's from me, she continued, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. From a future me. She says you die on December 3rd. Not me. You. A truck on the Hawthorne Bridge, on your way to meet me for dinner. She says she tried to save you in other loops, and it always ended worse. She says I should leave you, should move away, cut contact, let you live without me. Ethan set down his cup. The kitchen seemed very far away suddenly, like he was looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope. And what are you going to do? He asked. Grace looked at him, and in her eyes was everything they'd built. Every moment of the 14 months they'd fought for. Every choice they'd made to hold on instead of letting go. What do you think? She asked. December 3rd, 2025, dawned cold and clear. The sky a blue so sharp it could cut you. Ethan woke before Grace, watched her sleep for a while, memorized the way her eyelashes fluttered against her cheek, the way her hand curled into a fist near her chin. The way she smelled of jasmine and old books and home. He got up quietly, dressed, went downstairs to make coffee. The house was warm now. No more leaks, no more creaks that didn't belong. They'd made it into something living, something that breathed with them. He was pouring his first cup when the doorbell rang. A delivery man stood on the porch, holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "Ethan Cole?" he asked. "That's me. Sign here." The man thrust a clipboard forward, and Ethan signed without looking, his eyes on the package. It was the size of a shoebox, heavy for its size, addressed in handwriting he recognized. His own, but older, wearier. The writing of a man who had learned that some lessons could only be taught through repetition. He took it to the kitchen table, opened it. Inside was another letter, and beneath the letter, a gun. "Dear Ethan, this is the fourth loop. I didn't tell you about the others because you needed to believe you had a choice. You needed to believe that love could win. But love doesn't win, Ethan. Love never wins. It just loses more beautifully each time. The first loop, Grace died on the bridge. The second loop, Patricia died and Grace was destroyed. The third loop, you lived together until December 3rd, and then you died instead, and Grace was destroyed worse than before. She didn't last a year. She walked into the Willamette River with stones in her pockets, and they found her body near the steel bridge on New Year's Day. This is the fourth loop, and I've tried everything. I've tried leaving her, she's tried leaving me, we've tried running away, we've tried changing cities, changing names, changing everything. The bridge always finds us. December 3rd always finds us. Someone always dies. But I've found a way out. A real way out. The gun is loaded. One bullet. If you use it on yourself today before you leave the house, the loop breaks. Grace lives. Not happily. She'll grieve. She'll mourn. She'll spend years wondering why. But she'll live. She'll write her novels. She'll find someone else eventually. She'll have children who will have children. And her line will continue into a future that doesn't include you. This is the only gift I can give you, Ethan. The only gift that matters. Your life, traded for hers. Your death, purchased with the only currency that counts. Use the gun, break the loop, let her live. This is what love is. Ah! Ethan read the letter twice, 3 times. The gun sat on the table, black and patient, waiting for him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. He thought about the loops, about all the versions of himself who had loved Grace and lost her, who had tried to save her and failed, who had grown old and bitter and written letters in attics to younger versions of themselves who still believed in happy endings. He thought about Grace upstairs, sleeping, dreaming of stories and characters, and a future she didn't know was negotiable. He picked up the gun. It was heavier than he'd expected, cold, final. He checked the chamber. 1 bullet, just as promised. Enough to end everything, to break the loop, to purchase Grace's life with his own death. He thought about the first letter, the one in the attic. Don't fall in love with her. The voice of a man who had decided that safety was worth more than joy, that survival was worth more than living, that the absence of pain was the highest good. He thought about Grace's letter, the one she'd found in The Big Sleep. Leave him. Let him live. The same voice, really. the same fear dressed in different clothes. And he thought about Grace herself, downstairs in the kitchen, choosing to stay, choosing to fight, choosing love over safety, even knowing the cost. Ethan stood up. He walked to the sink, opened the window, and threw the gun into the backyard. It landed in the flower bed they'd planted together last spring, disappearing among the dormant roses. Then he climbed the stairs, 2 at a time, and woke Grace with a kiss. "Get up," he said. "We're going to be late." Late for what? For everything. For the rest of our lives. They walked to the Hawthorne Bridge that morning. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. Hand in hand, Grace's scarred palm pressed against Ethan's, the December cold biting at their cheeks, but not their hearts. The bridge was busy with rush-hour traffic, the usual Portland chaos of bikes and buses and cars driven by people late for work. Ethan and Grace stopped at the midpoint, looking down at the Willamette River flowing beneath them, dark and patient, and older than any of their troubles. "What are we doing?" Grace asked. "Choosing," Ethan said. "The letter said someone always dies, but it never said we had to accept that. It never said we couldn't try to change the rules." "How do we change the rules?" Ethan looked at the traffic, at the ice on the road, at the truck in the distance. A big rig carrying lumber from the mills, its driver probably tired, probably running behind schedule. He looked at all the variables that had lined up in 4 loops to produce death, and he thought about the one variable that had never been tested. "Together," he said, "we change them together." They stepped off the bridge at the same moment, not jumping, never jumping, but stepping back, onto the sidewalk, away from the street, away from the path that had been laid out for them by fear and repetition and the desperate logic of men who had forgotten how to hope. The truck passed. The driver honked, annoyed by something, unaware that he had just driven through the space where a loop had been broken, where a story had been rewritten, where love had finally won. Ethan and Grace stood on the sidewalk, breathing, alive, together. "Is it over?" Grace whispered. "I don't know," Ethan said, "but it's different, and different is enough." They lived. Not perfectly. No one lives perfectly, but truly. Ethan practiced law. Grace wrote novels. Chandler the dog grew old and gray and died in his sleep on a sunny afternoon, which is the best death any dog can hope for. They had children, a girl and then a boy, who grew up knowing that their parents had fought for their love, who understood that happy endings weren't given but earned. On their 50th anniversary, they returned to the Hawthorne Bridge. It had been rebuilt twice since that December morning, widened, strengthened, made safer for the Portland of a new century. But they stood at the midpoint, looking down at the Willamette, and they remembered. "Do you ever wonder?" Grace asked. She was 84 now, her hair white, her river-colored eyes faded, but still seeing everything that mattered. "About the other loops? The other versions of us?" "Sometimes," Ethan admitted. He was 85, his left hand stiff with arthritis, but he still held hers, still felt her scar against his palm, still knew exactly where he belonged. "I think they're still out there somewhere, writing letters in attics, learning the same lessons over and over until they get them right." "And we got them right?" Ethan looked at his wife. His wife, after 50 years, after children and grandchildren and a life built choice by choice, day by day, love by love. "We got them right enough," he said. Closing note. Thank you for reading The Letter in the Attic. If this story moved you, If it made you think about the choices we make for love and the loops we sometimes need to break, then you're exactly where you belong. Stories like this one are what we do here at American Story Channel. Tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary moments, of love that persists, of hope that refuses to die. We believe that every story has the power to change a life, maybe even yours. If you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Be part of this community of readers and dreamers who understand that the best stories aren't just read, they're lived. Stay with us. The next story is already waiting, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Good luck out there. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love, even when you know the cost. American Story Channel.